Hello, this is Patty Corbett Ward, and I would like to welcome you to another presentation from the Learning Thursdays educational series. As you know, or you just found out, Learning Thursdays are offered to professionals in our field with the goal of improving the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that individuals need to work competently as they work with folks who come to them for prevention, treatment, and recovery services. For today, folks, you're going to be viewing a workshop which is entitled Emerging Trends and Problem Gambling. It's presented to you today by Rebecca Cooper, who comes from OASAS. It is also brought to you today by Stelianos Kanelatos from the New York Council on Problem Gambling. You will have the opportunity to hear from them in a moment. I just would like to remind you, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to send them to the Learning Thursdays mailbox noted on the slide in front of you. All of that being said, I would like to turn this over to our presenters, and I will see you all at the end of the presentation. Thank you. Rebecca, Stelianos, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Patty, for that introduction. OASAS is pleased to partner with the New York Council on Problem Gambling today and Stelianos to do this presentation. I'm going to do a short intro just to give everyone that's viewing a general overview of problem gambling services in New York State, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the Youth Development Survey that really talks about what we know about youth problem gambling throughout the state, which is really important and helps inform our decision making and as we're trying to expand services and opportunities throughout the state to deal with problem gambling. And then Stelianos is going to talk really about the emerging trends that's happening with problem gambling, especially among our youth. And there's a lot of things happening in New York State related to the expansion of gambling and the opportunities to gambling, and we're especially concerned about what the impact of that will have on our youth and how we can help prevent them from developing problems as a result. So first I'm going to talk a little bit just in general about the OASAS problem gambling services that we currently have in the state. Right now, OASAS has 162 prevention providers throughout the state that do various things in the local communities to help prevent substance abuse and problem gambling from actually occurring. We also have one statewide problem gambling prevention provider, which happens to be the New York Council on Problem Gambling, that works very closely with OASAS in helping us implement a variety of problem gambling services throughout the state, and we enjoy that partnership with them. We also have 20 outpatient treatment programs that are specifically designated to provide problem gambling treatment services for those that are affected by problem gambling, and those services are available not only for those individuals that have a gambling problem, but also for family members and concerned others as well. We also have a pilot program called the Queen Center for Excellence, which OASAS started in conjunction with the New York Council on Problem Gambling back in 2015, where we piloted doing a referral for treatment services for problem gamblers that go directly to private practitioners that OASAS has trained and deemed appropriate to provide those services. We have 6 inpatient treatment programs throughout the state within our alcohol treatment centers that also have been designated as problem gambling only inpatient services so that people have access to a higher level of care if it's determined that they need it in New York State. And just recently, we awarded an RFP to develop 7 problem gambling resource centers throughout the city. And we're really excited about launching this new service because it's really going to help us increase access to care, really based on what the person's needs are. So those phase openings will start to begin in November of 2018. And the goal of those resource centers really is to be the centralized regional resource in 7 different regions throughout the state that focus on problem gambling, looking at collaborating in communities for prevention, treatment, and recovery. It will also be the first point of access if someone is looking to get services. They'll talk to someone within their region that will help make sure that they get to the most appropriate level of care as needed. The other piece of the problem gambling resource centers will be coordinating with the regional gambling facilities in that community to identify addressing problem gambling issues in the facilities, in the casinos, and on the floor, working on responsible gambling messaging to ensure that people understand about responsible gambling and risk-taking and what that may mean, and also working on the self-exclusion protocols that are available for people that decide that they want to be self-excluded from a gambling facility in the state. One of the most important first point of contacts and resources that we have for people that live in New York State is our New York State OASAS Hope Line. It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week Hope Line that anyone can call to get more information about substance abuse or problem gambling. The information you see in front of you, we also are available to provide that in many different languages, and we just wanted to make sure that people know that that's a point of resource for people that are looking for additional help and services as well. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Youth Development Survey, which is done throughout the state in school districts throughout New York State. The results I'm going to talk about briefly now are from the 2014-2015 OASAS YDS survey, and historically this survey focused on specific questions about risk and protective factors for those youth in our school districts related to substance abuse and violence and teen pregnancy and a lot of different questions. And we also were able to add some problem gambling questions, and this is the second round of the survey where those have been included. And it's important for people to understand, and this information really is helping us sort of collaborate and drive specific prevention services for our youth throughout the state related to gambling issues. Because one of the things that we know is that problem gambling is definitely a hidden addiction. A lot of people don't recognize it and don't understand what it looks like. And as we'll see in the survey results, a lot of times parents and community members don't recognize that underage gambling can be just as risky and the youth can develop problems just like underage drinking and drug use. So some of the interesting results and statistics that came out of that YDS survey are on the screen. The first one is we found that the students that answered the survey, of them, 39% of the youth have gambled in the past year. Now it's important to recognize that you must be 18 in New York State to gamble. And when we looked at that, when we asked what they were gambling on, the first thing they were gambling on are lottery tickets, raffles, sports, cards, games of skill, and bingo. So if you look at those and what the accessibility and the opportunities are for youth especially, a lot of these are easily accessible in our communities, and so we really need to do a better job and decreasing the accessibility and availability of gambling opportunities for youth, especially since it's illegal for them to be doing that. Another interesting statistic that came out of that survey is that 30% of kids who gamble say that they started gambling at the age of 10 or younger. And in contrast to what we found when we asked kids about the first time that they drank, 14% of kids who drink alcohol say they started at age 10 or younger. So what that says to us is that kids are actually have access to gambling opportunities and are actually gambling and placing bets earlier and at more rapid rates than kids who are drinking alcohol. Another interesting thing that came out of that survey for us that we really have to pay close attention to is that 85% of students said that their parents feel it's wrong for them to gamble. And when you compare that to other things that were listed on there, 97% said that they felt their parents thought it would be wrong for them to smoke tobacco, and 95% of them said they felt that it would be wrong for their parents felt that it would be wrong for them to drink alcohol. So we've done a really good job in decreasing the smoking rates and accessibility and availability of smoking in New York State for especially for youth, and also the warning signs and increasing laws and policies related to underage drinking. So we think that those high indicators of parents certainly having those conversations with their children about that, and the children getting messages from their parents that it's wrong for them to smoke and to drink alcohol is very high. But what this shows us is that only 85% say that their parents feel that it's wrong for them to gamble. So that's another interesting piece for us that we really need, not only on a state level, but in a community level and a family level, really need to focus on to help prevent kids from developing problems. Another thing that on the Youth Development Survey, what we look at is there's specific risk and protective factors that have been identified through research that show if kids exhibit certain risk or protective factors, they may be less likely or more likely to develop a problem related to alcohol or to gambling. And important things that came out related to the prevention risk factors for gambling. One of the first things that we saw was that peer use favorable towards gambling and drug use is a high risk factor. So if kids are hanging out with other kids that are gambling and or using drugs, and it's a favorable thing, they're more likely to develop a problem. Again, hanging out with friends who are using drugs, poor family management, meaning no clear rules or monitoring of what the kids are doing in the home or outside of the home, really not knowing who their friends are, is another risk factor for students developing gambling problems. A lot of family conflict in the home, family exhibiting antisocial behaviors such as having other family members that use drugs or gamble, having handguns in the home. If a child has a low commitment to school, really doesn't feel connected in the school, they're at a higher risk for developing a gambling problem. We saw this earlier on. Early initiation of gambling is one of the biggest indicators, and we saw this in the statistic on the slide before. 30% of kids are saying that the first time they ever gambled, they were at age 10 or younger. And so we know that the earlier onset of when a child gambles or drinks or uses drugs for the first time, the more likely they are to develop a problem later in life. Having high indicators of depression, and also living in an environment and a community where the laws and norms in the community are favorable towards gambling. And again, we've also seen that in the slide before, that kids are gambling on things such as lottery tickets and raffle tickets, and a lot of times in the community and family members don't understand that there's actually laws and regulations related to the fact that it's illegal for someone to gamble and place a bet under the age of 18. The other piece that we found and pulled out of the survey, which is also a really important driving force for everyone to take a look at, is the problem gambling prevention protective factors that came out of the survey. And what this means is that if kids have these protective factors in their life, they're less likely to develop a problem with gambling. And the first most prevalent protective factor was that if kids are involved in things within their community, pro-social involvement, which means clubs or sports or church activities, if they feel connected and are involved in community activities, they're less likely to develop a gambling problem. If they feel like they have school opportunities to be involved and they feel like they have a place in their school, they're less likely to develop a gambling problem. Again, peers, also hanging out with peers that are involved with community activities, being on a sports team, being part of something larger than them, pro-social involvement is a protective factor. Being in a school where they're rewarded for their pro-social and positive behaviors, where teachers are praising them and that they feel like that they have a place, is a huge protective factor. Belief in the moral order, being respectful to their teachers, to their parents, or whoever else is involved in their life, is a big protective factor. Feeling attached to their family, however they define their family, whatever that means, that they feel some attachment within that environment, that there's opportunities for the family to be together and participate in activities together, and then feeling like that they have some social skills to be adaptive in their community and their learning environment are all important protective factors to prevent an adolescent or young person from developing a gambling problem. So that concludes my portion of the presentation of just a general overview about problem gambling. If you want more information about that, you can go to the OASAS website, or the New York Council on Problem Gambling also has a great website with lots of information about problem gambling. So now I'm going to turn it over to Stelianos, and he's going to take over talking about emerging trends.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for joining in and listening in, and I hope that this part of the presentation is very helpful and very educational. Again, my name is Stelianos. I am the Prevention Specialist with the New York Council on Problem Gambling. We exist solely to raise awareness about problem gambling and to get help for those adversely affected, whether it's the person who is gambling or family and friends that are associated loved ones that are struggling because of the negative effects of someone else's gambling. Another thing that I always love to point out is that we're neutral about gambling. So we are not pro-gambling, we're not anti-gambling. Again, we solely exist to raise awareness about problem gambling and to get help for those that are adversely affected. And that neutral stance is really interesting because it allows us the opportunity to work with anybody that is interested in helping people that may or may not be struggling, that may be struggling with problem gambling, whether or not they are the person gambling or a loved one of someone who gambles. All right. Just some other information about the New York Council on Problem Gambling. What we do is we produce and disseminate information. We conduct and publicly support ongoing research and activities. And we support workshops, training activities, and conferences. As you can see on the slide, our upcoming annual conference is in October. And we're hoping for a lot of people to come around because we always have a great turnout with great workshops, great networking opportunities. And anyone interested in learning about problem gambling and what we can do to help people struggling, it's a great opportunity to come join us and be part of the conversation. Before I go too much further, I really want to warn everyone there's not a lot of gambling imagery and images in this presentation, but we will be talking about a lot of things that may be triggers or may be something that would affect someone in recovery struggling with problem gambling. So please be aware of your comfort and your ability to listen to this presentation and get more positive than possibly negative from it. All right. Quick overview of what I'll be talking about. We're going to start talking about emerging trends. We're going to talk about a number of different things. We're going to move into youth and why they're at a greater risk, and then kind of go right into preventing problem gambling, specifically talking about youth again, because we want to make sure we reduce the onset of gambling for youth so we can ensure that they will have a more positive and healthy life as they get older. Before we go too much further, I always like to define gambling because there's many different definitions out there. We at the New York Council on Problem Gambling focus on 4 key terms, which is risk, value, chance, and a result. So we define gambling as risking something of value on a game of chance for a desired result. And that could be anything. Something of value can be money, or it could be something else that is of value to you, whether it's an electronic thing, whether it's a possession. You know, we really keep this definition broad because gambling for us really focuses on people seeking that risk, that excitement from the chance of possibly winning or losing something. So again, risking something of value on a game of chance for a desired result. And I really wanted to focus on this just for a moment because we're going to revert back to this as we go further through this presentation. The emerging trends, really this is kind of an interesting issue, especially with the emergence of technology. And we're going to talk about how technology has affected and really offered a wide variety of different changes to the gambling world. And we really want to talk about the fact that, number one, there's been a huge public interest, whether it's parents, community members, or other professionals that are in the field of treatment, prevention, or recovery, especially because things are changing very rapidly. with all these new technologies, new abilities, new interweaving of the internet and connecting different networks and communities of people together, which is a great thing, but there are always consequences. There's always a balance of positive and negative, and we're going to talk about those things. And the other piece I want to talk about is availability or accessibility. And as we move on to the next slide, if we're thinking about a chart, increased accessibility to anything always offers the possibility of more problems, right? If I'm a person struggling with weight loss, if I have ice cream in my freezer, I have more access to that ice cream. If I have to drive 6 miles up the road, there's less access, which means there are less chances I may have a problem with it, because I'll think more before I do it. I'll have more time to kind of really think about, is this something that I want to engage in? Is this something that's really going to benefit what my goals are or me as a person? So if something is very accessible at our fingertips, there's a larger possibility for problems. And we're going to dive into that with a lot more detail as we go through this. So I always like to break things down to simplify it and give everyone an idea of where this, what direction and what path this presentation is going. So we're going to talk about 3 types of emerging trends. I've categorized them into web-based technology, land-based technology, and a blend of the two. And I'm going to do my best to give as much detail about each piece that I talk about, but if you want to learn more, there's so much information online. There's so much information through our website. And the technologies are changing rapidly, so it's always good to really keep yourself acquainted with this information, with this stuff as much as you can. So going into web-based technology, the first web-based technology or wire-based technology was the telephone. And that was invented quite some time ago. And back in that time, there wasn't any internet. You know, this is before the 60s. This is before a lot of this network that we have today. And the big issue with the telephone was sports gambling. And a big problem with it was that there was a lot of criminal activity, right? So criminal groups were running a lot of the betting. And the other problem was the sports players weren't making a lot of money. So it was really easy to try to bargain with them and give them an opportunity to make some additional money on the side. So this was a big issue in the past. But technology has changed drastically since then. And before we go further into that, again, so there were questions of ethical gameplay and criminal activity. And the big piece of it was, are these players going to play the best they can? Are they going to throw the game? Are they going to do certain activities? And this is really where the question of gambling as a problem started to emerge, at least in current times. So as technology changed, we have an explosion of possibilities. And I want to start with the internet, because that's really where a lot of technology spurred up, gave us different options. So the internet was invented in the mid-'80s for military use, but they opened it to the public in 1991. And anyone that knows, when we first tried starting to use the internet, you had the modem start up. It was very slow. It was usually dial-up, and you had to wait until it signed on, and all these weird, crazy sounds. And sometimes you could be waiting anywhere from a minute to almost 10 minutes just to sign online. And if you've got friends in other parts of the state or country, and maybe you're into cars, they take a picture of their engine. It took you anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes just to download a simple picture. Things have changed drastically since then. But if we're talking about the beginning of the internet in 1991, there was no gambling online because there was no reason for any company to build sites or capabilities for gambling because the internet didn't exist. But after that, the first bet took place in 1996. So in that time, from 1996 to today, it went from a $0 industry to a multi-billion-dollar industry. And one of the concerns that we have is that we didn't really take any surveys to see what the impact of the internet was before on problem gambling, before the internet existed, to today. There's really nothing to really balance it out to say the internet directly had an influence based on X, Y, and Z. But we are trying to do surveys now as we're getting more research and more interest to find out more about problem gambling and more about how it affects people in their lives. So accessing web-based gambling also has changed over the last couple of years. So the first way that people would access gambling was through computers. And as you can see, this computer is old, it is not very updated, but that's what we started with. Again, low technology, low capabilities, and anyone that is interested in computers and technology knows that as new software comes out, games come out. As things come out, we need more powerful machinery. Just like if I wanted a faster car, I need more powerful engine to get that car moving. Well, we've moved along very quickly in a short amount of time because we went from the desktop, then people had access on a laptop mobily, right? They can access a Wi-Fi if they bring their laptop to certain places, whether it's a cafe or something of that sort. So now they have access not just from their home, but from other connected sources. And now we've moved into tablets and cell phones, which have access literally everywhere. I went hiking with family recently. I was at the top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere, and I had access to the internet. So that means if I am a person that is struggling with problem gambling, even on a hike away from society, so to speak, I can still access gambling sites. Okay? So the technology and the ability to access online capabilities has really made a big change in the increase in problems because it's been easier. And most people have a smartphone. Whether or not you use your smartphone for gambling, that's not the question, but people have that access, that smartphone, the capability to access the internet, to access different apps and different ways to do things online. And with these increased accessibilities, right, coming back to this slide, with increased accessibility, there is increased possible problems with behavior of problem gambling. And these tablets and cell phones have done really great things to network everyone together, but they also have offered the ability to have more issues. So what is the attraction to technology? Well, first of all, the accessibility, right? We are in a culture where we want things now. We want things fast. We want things accessible. So that accessibility, the fact that it's in my pocket anywhere I want to be at any time, is very attractive to people. Affordability, right? Most apps are free. And whatever app you download, you may not have to purchase anything to get that app on your phone. Well, we like free, right? Everyone wants to get something free, a little taste, a little trial. So that's another thing that's attractive with this technology. The anonymity, right? I don't want to be known as a quote-unquote gambler, but behind my computer screen, behind my tablet, behind my cell phone, no one knows who I am. And we also have that ability to create avatars, right? Which is a picture of who you are on the screen. So if I'm a person that is participating in poker online, there may not be a picture of me, Stellianos, there might be a picture of Batman or whoever I want my avatar to be in that game. So no one knows who I am. And that kind of also bleeds into the disinhibition. If no one knows who I am, then I can kind of maybe make some more questionable decisions. Maybe I'll spend a little more. Maybe I'll say something that I wouldn't say typically. But that ability to hide behind that is attractive to a lot of people. Going back to convenience, again, in your pocket, not super expensive, easy to purchase a few things here and there, right? So that convenience people like as well. Disinhibition. This is a big issue with spending, right? If I don't have cash in hand and I go to buy something, I don't realize sometimes how much I have left over. And if I'm a teenager or younger and I'm making a $1 purchase here, $2 purchase there, $5, if I do that a couple of times a day, right? Like a $2, $1, $5 purchase today, do the same thing for the next 6 days. To me, it's one small purchase, but after a couple of days, I'm talking 40, 50 bucks in a week. So again, that disinhibition to really understand how much money is coming and going as quickly as it might actually be coming and going. The ability to escape, right? If I'm nervous before coming to do a presentation, a training, right before I can go sit aside and I can escape that fear, that anxiety about doing a presentation and maybe place a couple bets or do whatever it is that technology allows me to escape from the current situation. And then social acceptability. Everyone else is doing it, so I'm going to try it. Well, if everyone else is trying this app, maybe I want to try that app. And again, that brings that attraction back to the technology. All right? So again, we're going to kind of revert back to this a few times as well, but I wanted to cover that before we got any further. Online gambling technology. So the first things that came out were singular games. Why? The technology wasn't around. We couldn't have huge games with big pictures in different rooms and different capabilities because when the internet first came out, computers were pretty low functioning compared to at least what they are today. So they had to be singular games. They had to be someone choosing one game at a time, whether you're choosing poker or blackjack or slots. They were simple, they were very low grade, but again, it was the introduction to what we currently have today. So I'm not going to speak too much more about that because not many people that are participating are going to go to that. They like options, which brings us to online casinos. Now, online casinos are very similar to land-based casinos because they have every game possible, right? And then some. Because a land-based casino has limitations. They have space limitations. They have how many machines can I have to, while keeping a comfortable environment for people that where they would want to stay. But online, they can have unlimited number of games, unlimited number of options, unlimited number of access possibly to money. Again, because the internet offers all these different options. So again, there's hundreds of full casinos online. So someone that's struggling with problem gambling, they can access all this stuff at the touch of their fingers with their smartphones or any other technology they're using. And internet gambling games mimic all land-based casino games. Why? Because they might be games that a person choosing to gamble online is comfortable with, or maybe that's a way to introduce people to new games, right? So again, they're all there online. We want to make sure that we as professionals, whether prevention, treatment, or recovery, are aware of the options online, aware that these things exist. So as we're talking to people that are struggling, we have an idea what they're accessing and an idea of how hard it might be to avoid these types of things online. Fantasy and daily fantasy sports. This has become a huge issue over the last couple of years. But it's been around for a while, especially as fantasy sports. So for those that don't really understand what fantasy or daily fantasy sports are, fantasy sports existed for a while, and the difference is fantasy sports take place over the period of a season. So for instance, the NFL is one of the bigger ones people will participate in. And the NFL season runs a few months. I think it's like 6 or 8 months. And in that time frame, people are collecting data based on their fantasy team. What is a fantasy team? Well, a fantasy team is you have to build. So if you ever see right before a play is happening in football, people line up. And each one of those positions is important to do different things. The person's fantasy team is they select players to fulfill all those positions from different teams. So if I'm participating, I'll sit with maybe friends of mine, and I'll say, for my team, I'm going to pick this quarterback from that team. I want a running back from this team. I want a defensive end from this team. And I will pick the players that I want on my fantasy team while they do the same things. And over the period of a season, people will tally up the scores and points that their players in their fantasy team accumulate, and they will decide who has the most points and wins that season. Not a big issue because it takes an entire season to happen. So it's hard for someone to become, addicted to fantasy sports, or it's at least harder than it is to become addicted to daily fantasy sports. Because what daily fantasy sports with online technology has allowed people to do is take that experience and squish it into one day at a time. So if I know football exists on Monday, Thursday, and Sunday, those 3 days I can have 3 separate fantasy teams each week. And if there's several different sports going on at the same time, so maybe the NFL is going on, NHL is going on, and baseball, well, those are 3 different sports happening on all different days of the week where I can create fantasy teams regularly, which means I'm constantly picking, constantly getting excited, having that excitement, that rush that ties people into struggling with problem gambling. Okay? Yeah. All right. Land-based technology. So we're going to go back to online in a little bit as we talk about the merge. So we're going to move to land-based technology for a little bit. And this really started off with video lottery terminals or just the slot machines, right? So the slot machines had the 3 pictures, had the giant lever. You put a dime or a nickel or a penny, depending on what it was. And again, these started in the 1890s, so people weren't, walking around with huge amounts of money. But again, they had to pull the big lever, the roll goes through, and it selects a different picture. Well, technology has advanced tremendously since then. So when someone sits at one of those VLTs, video lottery terminals, excuse me, they are looking at a very complex computer screen. And in that screen, they can do 1 bet or up to 100 bets at a time. And they scroll through very quickly at a tap of a button. So if anyone has visited a casino, you'll hear people tapping every few seconds because that's how quickly this happened. Whereas in the past, the slot machine, you pulled it down, it took anywhere from 5 seconds to 20 seconds for it to go through its motions. This is happening instantly. So this is why the slot machine versus the updated video lottery terminal causes people to struggle with problem gambling. It happens much quicker. There's a constant flow of that excitement that I may or may not win something, and it can offer hundreds of bets per second. And just something else to keep in mind, the reason why there's so many machines is that they account for, on average, about 70% of most casinos' income. So this is where a lot of people are spending their time, spending their money, and if they're enjoying it in a healthy way, that's where they are. But we always worry about the people that are struggling with problem gambling, that are spending more than they mean to, spending more time and more money than they plan on at these machines. So maybe the video lottery terminal is not exactly someone's deal, especially the younger generations. Well, casinos and gaming technology companies are catching up, and what they're doing, excuse me, they're building club-style environments in casinos. It's very new and it's very high-tech. So what a person would see going into these rooms is a club feel. There's a DJ or a VJ. Behind them is a huge wall of TV screens that are showing the different games that are going on, showing maybe something else, whether it's a sports event or a commercial or whatever. And it's all piecemeal together. A lot of information all at the same time, similar to a user's experience with like YouTube, right? You got a video on the right side. There's all these other options going on. You pick and choose. Everything's at the fingertips. Everything's happening very quickly. So not only do we have that giant wall of screens, we have the VJs and DJs. There's also electronic gaming tables. So every game that exists as a table game in a casino now is video-based, and they're all there at the touch of a finger. Some of them allow people to play together. Some of them are separate games, but they can text or chat back and forth. So if I like this table and someone's on the other side of the room, we can chat back and forth. I could choose who I do and don't want to interact with. Again, very similar to a social feel that people would find on a social media platform. So really integrating the technology and what younger generations of people are interested in. Something to be aware of, especially because there's not a lot of information about this technology out there yet. There's not really any research about how it may or may not hurt people other than theoretical beliefs about past research. So again, we really need to keep our eyes out and aware of how this new technology and new ability for people, especially in the younger ages and generations, to participate, how is this going to affect them in the realm of problem gambling. Take a little swig here. So another emerging type of land-based gambling technology is video game gambling machines. Video game gambling machines are an option for people that are interested in skill-based games, whether it's a racing game, a first-person shooter game. So they're taking a lot of these very popular video games and they're integrating them into machines that will go into casinos to tie in people that play video games, skill-based video games, into gambling games. Again, really targeting younger generations. One of the things that they say on most of their sites is that they're targeting people aged 21 or 18, depending on what site. So about 21 to 35, maybe to 40. That's the age range that these technologies are targeting. And the gameplay, similar to VLTs, they're researching how should the screen be, what the angle should be, where should the seat be, what's the most comfortable position for it, should there be speakers out here in the console. The game controllers are looking very similar to controllers that we would see in other big-name video games like Xbox or PlayStation. So they're really mimicking the feel, the atmosphere, the colors, the sounds, the action of the play in the game to really integrate the people that are interested in skill-based games and bring them into casinos so that this way they can play games that are similar to what they would play at home, but have the advantage that they could possibly gamble. That's the look from the industry. And from a perspective of looking out for people struggling with problem gambling, this is, as they say on their sites, they're targeting 21 to 35, 40-year-olds. So we need to be aware that as these people are coming in, whether we're going out to talk to them for prevention, if they're coming to see you as a treatment provider, or if you're a recovery person, we really need to understand these different games and how they may affect someone seeking recovery from problem gambling. All right, so a blend of the two. So video games and gambling have kind of existed hand in hand, but separated for a long time because there wasn't the capability that the internet gives to have video games where people can spend money on them, unless it's a person sitting next to each other. So video games have been around for a while, but they have had gambling-like activities incorporated in them. So these are just 3 games that I kind of pulled together. Alex Kidd is a game that came out in 1994, and the game's premise is this boy is trying to find his father, and he's got to go to different planets to figure out where he is and save him. The way that he gets around is he may pick up a couple of dollars here or there, but he needs items to win the game. And where does he go? He goes into a gambling parlor. So Alex will go into a gambling parlor. There's a stage where there's a host. There's a person that Alex will gamble against playing rock, paper, scissors. So maybe you put $5 to get a pogo stick to get up above a cloud, and you play rock, paper, scissors. If you lose your money. You get kicked out. If you win, you get your item. So that was a gambling, right? Because we talk about gambling as risking something of value on a game of chance for a desired outcome. Well, it's not money in dollars, but in the video game currency, that might be important to someone playing the game. Something of value. They need the pogo stick. The desired outcome is to win that pogo stick to enhance their gameplay. Okay? Sims Free Play came out a lot more recently. This was on tablets and smartphones. And the game's premise is about, creating a community and people and going through the cycles of life. But in the game, farming is a huge thing. And in the game, you can purchase a plant that once the plant is built, you can select things to make. And the plant goes into a screen with 3 pictures. And if you roll through and you get your 3 pictures, you win whatever that plant would have made in a larger sum of money. If in Somalians, again, in-game currency, not in dollars, but in-game currency, if you lose, the plant eats you. But again, so same gambling field. There's a possibility of winning, possibility of losing, right? Risking something of value, in-game currency on the game of chance for a desired outcome. And that brings us to Counter-Strike. So the games are getting more advanced. Counter-Strike is a game that could be played on console or via the web. And in that game, there was the ability to win by finding. So it really wasn't winning. It was finding either at the end of a game, at the end of a mission or a board, the ability to win or get skins. And skins are things that would decorate weapons, right? So if my weapon has a certain skin on it, it may show that I am much further in my gameplay or how further I am in the game than someone else. Well, Valve, which is the mother company of Counter-Strike, decided to come up with another company or partner with another company called Steam to help people take these skins and put them into an online monetary system where they can gamble. So Steam takes those skins from Counter-Strike, and now kids are able to go and gamble on other sites. How can kids gamble? Some of them may ask if they're of age. Some of them may not look for any verification. So if I'm a kid and I want to gamble on a site, I've got my skins from Counter-Strike, I bring them through Steam, translate them into some type of coin, and then I go on, they ask my age, I put, of course, I'm 21, I would like to participate in this gambling game. If they don't search for any other verification to say whether or not I'm 21, the kid can now gamble. So as a parent, treatment provider, prevention provider, recovery provider, we need to be aware that these are things that kids might be involved in. Now that's just one way that these are blending between gaming and gambling. In games, there are now things beyond skins, right? So skins, there are other technologies that you can actually exchange skins for money. You can exchange them for either currency for other type of games. You can exchange them for currency to bet with someone else on the outcome of a mission, or if there are 2 teams of people playing online, Counter-Strike or other games, we can take these in-game currencies and translate them back and forth. If I win, I get your in-game currency, whether it's skins or some type of currency, right? But loot boxes have come up. That's been a big thing recently. And this is a kind of a new way for people to upgrade characters, upgrade their gameplay. So loot boxes have kind of always been around in many different games, but they weren't really an issue because most of the time you would earn them by reaching a certain level, reaching a certain ability in the game. Well, loot boxes now can be found in almost like stores in the game. So you go into this room in the video game where there's a line of loot boxes. They can cost anywhere from 99 cents, $5, $10, $50, $100. And the more money that you put towards your loot box, the more items you have the chance of getting, winning, right? In the loot box, we don't know what's there. We just know there's a list of 1 item, 5 items, 100 items, whatever it's set up, because each game's a little different. So if youth are participating in these loot boxes, if they spend money, whether it's in-game currency or actual money, because a lot of places now take actual money, whether it's via smartphone or through PlayStation, Xbox, or those other big game companies, spending money on the chance of winning items that we don't know what they are, and the desired outcome is to upgrade our character, upgrade our gameplay so it's a lot more exciting, a lot more fun. Well, that's gambling. So in these games, loot boxes are really following this trend of blending gaming and gambling together. So video games and gambling. So again, talking about whether it's skins or in-game currency, ways of gambling, valuables on duels, right? It used to be I'd have to sit next to a friend, sit next to a buddy or a cousin or whoever I'm playing games with and say, hey, I'm going to beat you at this race, or we're going to play Mortal Kombat, I'm going to beat your character. Well, people could do this online, right? The example we talked about earlier was Counter-Strike using the website Steam to transfer money or currency or skins or whatever back and forth. There's a lot of different options out there, and they keep growing and changing, right? Just like everything else does. But they're able to gamble on duels, whether it's between 1 or 2 people, or sometimes full game groups of people. So in Counter-Strike, there might be teams of people going against each other. Not only is this happening online, but people are going to full stadiums and coliseums that are filling up with people, generally between the ages of about 18 to 40, who are interested in watching these competitions happen, participating in gambling, and just bringing up this, they're really just trying to get involved. And this definitely needs to be on our radar because there are cable companies and online web streaming companies that are looking into partnering with some of these major gaming companies because just like, you know, I think there was at one point there were people saying that it would be laughable to put poker on TV. Well, poker's been on ESPN and doing pretty well because it's still there. So this is one of those up-and-coming things. People are watching games. There are literally millions of people watching some of these games stream live. So this is a big thing, especially with the ability to gamble on them and risk money, whether it's actual money, in-game currency, or other items that people are willing to put against each other in a gambling type of atmosphere. Yeah, I think I covered all of that. So why is this a problem for youth, right? We talked about the different types of technology. We're talking about how this is accessible and interesting and maybe exciting for really anybody. But why are youth always such a target? Well, anyone that works with youth knows that their brains are in development, and the number one thing is they don't make good choices. Well, they can't make good choices yet because their brain isn't fully developed. The brain develops from the back to the front, right? So the back, that physical coordination, I have to be able to get to things that are interesting. Then the next thing is that motivation. I need to get to that for a reason. Is it because I'm hungry? Is it because I want to make my mommy and daddy happy? What is my motivation? Then the emotional attachment. This makes me feel good. That does not make me feel good. And the very last thing to develop is that judgment, the prefrontal cortex right in front of their forehead. Being that that's the last part to develop in the brain, which takes until about the age of 24, 25, some studies say for men almost 30. Sorry guys, we're a little slower. But if it takes that long for us to develop our brain, whether male or female, to the mid to late 20s, kids in their teenage years literally don't have the ability to make the best choices. And the reason for that is their brains are on fire, right? Anyone who has teenagers around, whether you're a teacher, a parent, or some type of family or community member, you know kids are all over the place. One day they're friends with these people, the next day they're enemies. A week later they're friends again. Why is that? Well, the teenage brain, they're at a part of their development where they're trying to test out and explore anything that might be exciting. Because up until their teenage years, their dad told them what their life should be, their mom told them what their life should be, their grandparents told them what their life should be, their aunts and uncles, their friends, then their teachers. Everyone gives them this perspective of how life should be. But then they hit the teenage years and they realize, everybody can't be right. What's the best life for me? What's interesting to me? So they go and explore everything. And they're going to try things and explore with things and see what is good and bad and what feels comfortable, right? That emotional attachment we talked about. And while their brains are on fire, it's pruning out things that are good or bad. And hopefully, we're teaching our kids to make healthy choices, avoiding things like risky choices like gambling, alcohol, drugs. So the brain doesn't develop pathways where the brain says, this is what makes me happy. So if they develop with the brain connection that gambling gives me excitement, winning makes me happy, that's what I need to do to be happy. If their brain develops that way, that's a very hard thing to change. So we want to make sure their brains develop in a healthy manner where they're doing healthy things. Earlier, Rebecca was talking about things pretty proactive, talking about like attachment to school, clubs, sports, other things to help build that brain and develop that brain in healthy avenues to feel happy and feel excited. So youth in problem gambling, youth are at risk due to their brain development and the fact that all these things are exciting to them, right? They want access. Well, a lot of teenagers don't have cars, they may not have credit cards, but a lot of them have smartphones. Whether they're buying them themselves or their parents are giving it to them, that phone gives them access. So where in the past a kid may not have been able to go into a casino, either because they didn't look old enough, they didn't have fake IDs, maybe they were too far away. Now they have a phone in their pocket, they have accessibility immediately to pretty much anything they want unless there's some type of parental control or oversight. Affordability. Most kids are broke. They either have chore money, but most of them don't have a full-time job, so they need things that are affordable and cheap. What are apps? Most of them are free, right? Especially gaming apps. They want you to get the app, play the game, and purchase things in the game to upgrade character and to do things like that. So when we're talking about this affordability, that's how they get kids involved or people involved because things are free. You try it out and you decide whether or not you want to invest a few bucks here or there in that game. Anonymity, right? I'm anonymous because no one can see me on this side of the phone. So I am whoever I want to be in that game. The convenience, again, it's in my pocket. It's wherever I am. If I'm at school and I don't want to deal with school, I go out in the hallway and say I'm going to the bathroom. Maybe I'm going to gamble. Maybe I'm going to play my game for a few minutes. It's convenient because it's in my pocket. Disinhibition. So disinhibition, if I don't have a good idea of how much money I'm spending, again, going back to that money spending, if I'm not keeping track, I can easily go through a lot of money very quickly. There are things that people lose track of online. I remember, someone that was spending money on clothes online. If they buy a shirt today, the next day a pair of pants, the next day a shirt and a pair of pants, the next day after that a pair of socks. Well, each day it's not a lot, but at the end of the month, what was $10, $15, $20 purchase is now maybe a few $100s. And that inability to see that disinhibition to see, oh, this is where my money's going. Oh, I'm keeping track on this paper, or I have an app or something. If they're not keeping track, that disinhibition is, oh, it's only $2. Oh, it's only another $1. And before they know it, this money adds up very quickly. Escape. Very easy to escape when you have this technology at your fingertips, right? If I need to escape, before going somewhere, I pull out my phone, whether sitting for a bus, sitting in the waiting room at a doctor's office. It just gives you that opportunity to escape very quickly. And then again, social acceptability. I can't be judged if I'm by myself in my bedroom on my smartphone, right? Most people aren't going to see what I'm doing. Therefore, I can hide it. I can be in secret. I can be anonymous. I can be socially acceptable because I can choose what people do and don't know about me, okay? So youth and problem gambling. So the consequences of youth gambling, number one is an increased risk for delinquency and crime. Well, that makes sense because if I'm not focused on school or focused on things I need to focus on, I'm delinquent because I'm focused on something else. I'm preoccupied thinking about gambling. I'm preoccupied thinking about this game I might want to participate in. Maybe I'm involved in crime. Why? I have no money, right? I'm a kid. I'm 14, 15 years old. Maybe I have a job. I can only work a few hours a week legally. So I need to get money because perhaps my gambling habit far exceeds my income. So I might resort to crime, whether it's stealing from a store or maybe stealing things from my own family to pawn off and get a couple extra dollars to participate in the gambling activities that I feel that I need to do because that's where I get my excitement. I feel like I need to do that. So we need to make sure that youth and parents are really aware of the risks that are coming up. Risk for other substance use and abuse. Anytime I did a presentation for youth, I always told them good choices lead to other good choices. Poor choices lead to other poor choices. If I get up in the morning, I go for a walk, or I do 100 push-ups, I'm more likely to eat healthier. I'm more likely to make healthier choices for myself throughout that day. If I get up and I don't work out, I don't do anything, I'm more likely to eat something that's not as healthy, maybe not do something later in the day that's healthy. Well, same thing. Studies are showing that people that are struggling with problem gambling, they're at a 70% risk of having a substance use disorder. So if they're choosing to gamble, they have a much higher risk of addiction or struggling with other substances, right? Most times we see pictures or images of people gambling, whether it's in the movies, advertisements, we see people with cigarettes, we see people with alcohol, right? In casinos, when people go to gamble, what do they bring around? They bring some alcohol, right? Calms you down, makes you feel more calm. But again, these things are linked together. So poor choices or risky choices for youth tend to go hand in hand. So we want to make sure youth are aware that if they're making poor choices, they may start making other poor choices. And we really want to help guide them to make better, healthier choices to lead to other, better, healthier choices. Increased risk for addiction. Well, if my brain starts to get wired and believe that I need gambling to feel good, I need gambling to feel excited, well, then I'm going to start getting addicted to it. I'm going to get to a point where I need to seek treatment to somehow, through some type of therapy, rewire that brain to learn a healthier way of finding happiness and finding excitement. Where again, similar to alcohol or other substances, the earlier kids are using these things, the more at risk they are. So we want to make sure that they're aware of these consequences. Damage relationships. Well, obviously, if I'm stealing from family members and friends, if I'm borrowing money and I'm not bringing it back, if I'm delinquent, I'm not doing well at school, I'm not maybe connected with a lot of my friends, because if my friends aren't gambling, I may not be spending time with them if I'm focused on gambling. So I'm going to have these damaged relationships. So my support network will start falling apart. So if I'm a 15-year-old person who's struggling with my gambling, struggling with my finances, struggling with my relationship with my parents, which is already a risk for kids that are teenagers, right? They're already testing boundaries, already kind of dancing that line between having a good relationship with their parents and testing too far, where they kind of have start butting heads with them. We're going to put on top of that a struggle with problem gambling. Obviously, that's going to damage a relationship, and it's definitely going to make things a lot harder for that youth to get to a point where they can be healthier, because their support network is starting to disappear, their relationships. Poor academic performance. Well, if I'm at school and I'm thinking about, I owe Joey money, I owe my girlfriend money, or my boyfriend money, or my family money, and I've taken something. I plan on replacing it, but I had to take that season of Game of Thrones to sell it to this person to get some money back. I know I feel like I can win it back. I feel like I can get that back so I can replace it, right? Am I thinking about school? No, I'm not focused at school. I'm thinking about all these other personal problems I have going on. I'm thinking about the next time I'm going to gamble. Maybe I'm going through withdrawal. I'm literally physically feeling sick because I feel like I need that excitement from gambling. I can't focus on school, so my academic performance is going to drop. So again, these are consequences and risks that youth are facing when they're struggling with problem gambling. And mental health issues, which includes depression and anxiety. Again, obviously, I'm going to have anxiety if I'm struggling with money, if I owe people money, if my relationships are falling apart, if I feel like I'm losing control where I can't fix these relationships. I don't have the ability to step away from gambling. I don't have the ability to improve my grades because my head's not in the game. My head is with gambling. Well, I'm going to start getting depressed because I realize I'm losing control. I'm not able to feel good about myself without this gambling fix. So I'm going to struggle with depression and anxiety. So again, youth problem gambling consequences, the risks are increased risk for delinquency and crime, substance use and abuse, risk for addiction, damaged relationship, poor academic performance, and mental health issues. Again, and they all kind of blend and interweave together, because as we have one problem, if we don't solve that one problem, something else will go wrong. If I have my car and really just the small front fender starts to fall off, yeah, it's a small issue. But if that's interconnected with other parts of the bottom of the car and they all start to come off, now it becomes a bigger issue, something I may want to look into. Same thing with this. As different parts of people's lives start to get affected by problem gambling, as youth start feeling like they're losing control, everything interweaves together and becomes a much bigger problem. So we really want to talk to youth and give them some tools to help them out to kind of pick off these issues before they become bigger problems and start blending with other big problems caused by their addiction to gambling. So we talked about technology changes, we talked about emerging trends, we talked about why they're, what is the draw to these different technologies, right? The accessibility, affordability. We've talked about youth. Why are they more at risk? Well, that brain development, the youth are more at risk because their brains are changing and they're testing more things. They don't have that ability to make good judgments. Well, what can we do about it, right? I always like to do presentations where we actually give people steps that they can take with them, actionable steps that don't seem too hard to do. Well, here's what we can do. Number one, we need to educate youth about the gambling risks and consequences. Let them know, right? If I don't know that touching the pot on the stove is hot, I'm going to grab that pot because it's in the way and I need to move it. I'm not going to think that's a hot pot. I shouldn't move it. Kids need to know the risks. They need to know what is a possible consequence of engaging in gambling activities. We need to educate youth about risk and chance. They need to understand how these games are played. They need to know that if I download a gambling app, I'm going to win more when it's free because the algorithm is different to win when it's free than when I pay for it. The algorithm can change. So even though I'm winning maybe 80 or 90% of the time on the free app, when I start paying for it, I'm going to win at a much lower rate because the company that made the app wants to make money. So some people may win, but the majority are going to lose most of the time. That's how the game companies make money. So kids need to realize how these games function. How do they work? Is everything, we need to make sure they know that some games are regulated and follow rules. Some games they may access online that don't follow rules, and maybe they're set up specifically just to drain everything they can. So we need to let them be aware of what is out there, be aware of what is chance. Well, if I flip a coin, heads, flip a coin, heads, flip a coin, heads, flip a coin, heads, what's the next thing? The coin doesn't know. It's completely a 50-50 chance. So when we're talking about gambling activities, there's chance involved that they cannot predict. That's what makes sports betting gambling, because I might know everything about sports possible. I might know all the statistics. I might be completely obsessed. But I don't know a player's going to get hurt. I don't know that someone's not going to get played. I don't know if someone's going to get arrested on the way to the game where they can't play. I don't know if someone maybe some of the players ate something and they're feeling nauseous. I don't know that. I can't see that on the field. So there's lots of variables, which brings chance into it, which is why we can't predict precisely whether or not someone's going to win or lose. There's chance involved. Kids need to know that. We need to empower youth to make choices. Kids need to know that their choices make a huge impact, not just on themselves, not just on on their peers, but on the community as a whole. So if they choose not to gamble, their peers may choose more often not to gamble. If youth choose to go and talk to community members or family members about things they've learned about gambling, other people might learn these things too. They might raise awareness that gambling is a problem for youth. Maybe some community members don't realize that. It's a very good possibility. Maybe family members don't realize that scratch-off tickets are gambling and that youth shouldn't be given scratch-off tickets as a holiday gift. Maybe they haven't seen commercials. Maybe they haven't been exposed to that. But if a youth tells them, that empowers the youth. The youth is changing the behavior, or at least enlightening people to make healthier choices for themselves, for their peers, and for their community. So youth need to be aware. We need to tell youth how strong they are, how powerful their voice is, and how much influence that they can have on the changes in their own community. Again, if they're choosing not to do certain things, behaviors will change everywhere else. They have the power to choose. They have the power to affect. Parents in schools with gambling-free policies and events. So when we talk about helping parents in schools with gambling-free policies and events, a lot of people first think of, oh, the policy, we need to change the policy of the school or the policy of the community as a whole. Not necessarily. How about having one game with no raffle, no 50-50 raffle? That's gambling. And if that's not there for one game, we are offering one game of time frame of no gambling opportunities for youth. That could be a policy. That's empowering the schools. That's empowering parents to say, this is important to us. If we're having a health fair, a 50-50 raffle, that's gambling. So if I have a health fair and I might say no alcohol, right? Because it's a health fair. No drugs. It's a health fair. But what about people that are coming in to that health fair in recovery from alcohol and gambling addiction? Well, if they come in and there's a 50-50 raffle, that's a trigger. That could trigger that person to start their gambling again, which again can lead into a comorbid situation where they struggle with gambling and alcohol again. So we need to raise awareness to these community event holders. Say, listen, it's important to us, to youth. Have youth tell them. Empower youth. They can make that difference to go and have those conversations. Maybe the youth aren't comfortable, but if youth bring it up to their parents and their parents bring it up to the schools and talk to other people, now people are becoming more aware and we can make those changes and hold events that are gambling free so that youth are not exposed and so that people in recovery or struggling with problem gambling can have a break. Maybe they need that break. They come to that community event to get that break, to feel comfortable, to engage themselves with the community, and they need to have that escape. We need to give them that opportunity. Advertising and promotion guidelines. I think it would be crazy to say that a gambling company shouldn't advertise a positive view on gambling. That's like someone who owns a paper towel company advertising that their paper towel will fall apart when used to pick up liquid. That doesn't make sense. They want to show that their paper towel is going to hold up on liquid. But people need to realize that, yes, some people are going to win. Some people are going to have fun. But a lot of people are losing. Most people go to a casino or an online gambling site or something, hopefully for entertainment. Hopefully they're going there for fun and not to go there to say, I have to win. This is my income. It should be an expense that is entertainment. If I go to a concert, I don't expect to come home with money. I don't expect to come home with anything except for what I might purchase there. So I'm not coming home with more money, maybe a t-shirt, but I'm going to spend money on food, I'm going to spend money on the tickets, spend money on the trip, spend money on maybe a hotel. I'm not getting money back. People need to realize that even though that this could be exciting, right? That's what the industry is looking to put forward. We also need to inform people, again, that there's risk, that there's chance in all the games, and that most people are going to spend money, and most people are not going to walk away with that big win. Okay? And finally, know where to get help. There is help available. And just like Rebecca was saying, there is increase of help that is becoming more and more accessible, more and more available in areas across the state. And if we're not there yet, we're doing our best to get there. Both OASAS and the New York Council on Problem Gambling, amongst other people, amongst other organizations, are really pushing to get help available for people that are struggling with problem gambling. So please, if you need help, find help resources. You can either visit us at the New York Council on Problem Gambling, visit Rebecca and her team on OASAS. There's links to different sites, to the Hope Line, to different resources. Stuff is there. There is help available. And that's something else that we need to help youth understand, is that if they are struggling, there is help. Just like if they get hurt in school, there's a nurse's office. There's a place they can go to get the help that they need. So we need to make sure youth, parents, community members, and everyone else is aware that there is help available for people that are struggling with gambling issues. Just wanted to end on some resources. Excuse me, I'm not going to read all the text on here, but Youth Decide is a youth empowerment and community action project and site that offers different materials and resources to help people really engage youth and engage the community into helping reduce youth access and preventing youth gambling. Know the Odds is a great resources to help is a great site that offers resources just to help raise awareness and get people to help and just educate people. New York Council on Problem Gambling's main site, again, links to any type of resource available that can help people in New York State. And youthgambling.com offers a ton of information and research about youth gambling, about how we can help youth and how we can bring awareness and help to these different people. There are treatment resources. New York State Helpline is the best way to connect. You call that number, you get a trained clinician. They can, they're not going to ask for a ton of personal information. I've actually called it myself because I was curious. They're going to ask maybe how old you are, what kind of help you're looking for, your local area where you live, and they'll give you options, right? Because some areas may have more options than others, and they'll have that list. And that's a great place to start. And you don't have to do anything. So if someone makes that call, you just want to find out if there's a help available. What is there? I don't actually plan on taking action, but at least there's a resource to call, to reach out, try to get the help that you're looking for, and try to fill in the gap of, hey, I think I have a problem with gambling, to I need resources. That can fill that gap. Now again, so we have the OASAS website. Gamblers Anonymous is a fellowship organization similar to Alcoholics Anonymous, where people can lean on other people, get some help, find someone to talk to, find people to lean on. And then Gam-Anon is very similar. So Gamblers Anonymous is for the person struggling with problem gambling, and Gam-Anon is for anyone linked to those people that is adversely affected by someone else's gambling. And again, you can go, you meet somebody, you have someone there that's been through it, that can kind of point you in some directions, just give you some help and some resources. So just wanted to point out some resources, some different help that may be out there, some things that are there. The main point that I really want to drive home is that technology is changing drastically. It changes regularly. And I think the easiest way to realize that is anyone that has a smartphone, there's constantly updates. Why are there constantly updates? Well, there might be bugs, there might be technology flaws, there might be a link issue. If one app changes, then it's linked to something else. This one's going to need an upgrade too, because this one upgraded this one. So there's constantly changes, constantly new apps, new websites, new capabilities, new ways of linking, new ideas, new gaming and gambling opportunities. It's really hard to keep up with. The main idea is to know that technology is changing, that some people can enjoy it, some people are going to struggle with it, and really just ask people. Ask people what they're doing. Talk to youth. Find out what youth are doing. Have these conversations. What are youth involved in? What are you doing when you're playing games? Are you by yourself? Are you with other people? What games are you playing? What about it do you enjoy? Just have conversations. A lot of times, people may want to talk about their interests. They want to talk about these things. And if you show interest and intrigue, again, whether you're prevention, treatment, or recovery, if you're having these conversations with people and showing genuine interest in what they're involved in, you can really get a better view, a better picture of what's going on, not just with that person, but with their network and possibly in your community, so you can help other people that may be struggling with the same thing. So just kind of review real quick. We talked about emerging trends, online-based. We talked about land-based. We talked about the blend of the two. We talked about why youth are at risk and why. We talked about preventing problem gambling, both for really any age person, but we really focused on youth because, again, youth are in the developmental stage, and we want to make sure that they develop as healthy as possible. We want to make sure they get through school. We want to make sure they make healthy choices. Anyone that, I would say most people that have kids want that healthy thing, and people that don't have kids also want kids to live healthy. Right? When my best friend doesn't want kids, he wants my kids to live healthy. He always talks to me, what am I doing? How am I parenting? What are the questions that I ask? What are my kids involved in? He's interested because he cares about the development of my kids. Just like anyone else, most people really want to see the best for their kids. The easiest way to find out what's going on, you can hunt information online, read all the blogs you want, have a conversation. Talk to the kids. Talk to parents. Talk to community members. Find out what's going on. Show interest. People want to feel important. People want to feel like you care. Give them that opportunity. Give them the platform to really talk to them. Talk about these emerging trends. Maybe it's a new video game, right? One of the big games where people are talking about is Fortnite right now, Counter-Strike. That may not be the big game in a few months, right? Gamers are coming up with new games, industry is changing. The big thing to keep up and on top of everything is really just have genuine, heartfelt conversations to really get into the nitty-gritty of what's important to people, what are they involved in, and what is it that's healthy and what is not healthy, and how can we help. So that is really the end of my presentation. I'd really like to thank everyone for coming and listening to this. I really hope that you learned at least a couple of details and gave you some springboards and some interest in some topics that you may want to learn a little bit more about. But hopefully it gave you some baseline to give you an idea of the different technologies that are emerging, that are changing, and that are rapidly developing in our current world. Again, I'm Stelianos Kanelatos, and thank you very much.
So I would like to again thank Stelianos and Rebecca for their time, for their passion, and for their expertise. I also would like to thank staff at Media Services. They put a lot of work in behind the scenes, to make sure that the product that you view is of a high standard of professionalism. As always, your feedback, folks, is appreciated. If you would like to offer us your feedback, take a moment, if you would, to fill out the brief survey located at the SurveyMonkey link. Again, I would like to thank you for joining us, and we will be back next month. Bye now.